Jonathan, welcome to our Fireside Chat series. Really good to connect.
Pleasure's mine, Martin.
Well, look, for the benefit of the audience, I thought it would be great just if you wouldn't mind giving a bit of an introduction on yourself, your background, what brought you into the value space.
That's fantastic. So my name is Jonathan Drew. I'm the Director of Value Engineering for Encode. And this is actually the fifth value role I've done. At Encode, I'm really building out our value program from scratch. This is the third company I've done that at. And, it's kind of a funny story about how I got into value. About 14 years ago, feels like an eternity. I was an SDR or a BDR, and I would make cold calls. And what was really interesting is at the time I was working for a company called Seal Software, which was an AI contract metadata extraction tool. And 14 years ago, AI was very hard to talk to people about, not really a big deal. So if you can imagine calling people up and talking to them about AI-powered contract extraction was tricky. But during that time, people were like, what? I don't understand what you're talking about. Is that like a robot? What's going on? But I found out that if you spent some time to really understand what the product was doing at almost a personal level as it related to roles and responsibilities, and you found a specific individual within a company who had a pressing problem that the tool would be to solve, and you spoke to that person in terms of specific KPIs and the direct impact of the tool, it just dramatically increased your odds of getting a meeting. So this was some time ago. There was a little bit of regulation called the Dodd-Frank regulation. I know we're going down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but essentially every single big bank had to go in and pull specific bits of data from all of their ISDA agreements. And if they didn't do this, the banks would have to suffer all these really rough penalties like selling off businesses, government fines. So we started off by going out and finding all the people responsible for Dodd-Frank compliance with a lot of banks called GSIBs, setting up meetings. It worked really well as an SDR. Right. And then from there, it sort of became something different. I started sitting down and saying, well, what are the use cases? So what are the value-driven use cases that we can create? And then from that, it became a larger value practice.
I mean, I'd love to just dive deeper into that because it's not that common that I speak to or encounter somebody that works in business value that started as a sales rep all the way in the SDR role. I think that's fascinating because you have literally worked your way through the sales roles, so to speak, right? But you were already had an understanding of value all the way early in when you were BDR. Was that innate?
I think part of it is an element of curiosity. I've done a lot of hiring for value roles. I think probably the most important trait you can get with someone, other than the ability to do modeling, is having an element of curiosity. Because fundamentally speaking, that's what's going to allow you to build a really effective program. Like understanding the why piece. Like obviously you can calculate value. Anyone can calculate value. But if we think about value calculation and quantification, that's only half of the puzzle. Geico can tell me they're going to save me 15% or more in car insurance. I'm still generally not calling them because I have insurance that's fine, right? You need to have another piece to it, and you need to be able to figure out exactly what is going to be the quantified impact that's going to matter for people from both a business perspective, but also from like a sales process and a narrative perspective, right? Because people care about different things in different ways, is what I found.
Yeah, absolutely. Different personas, different reasons, the whole Maslow hierarchy of needs, addressing different levels are really important. And so you said you've had 5 different roles, right, in value at 5 different companies. And last 3, you've introduced and built the value practice from scratch. Is that right?
Not in the last 3. I would say the one at Seal Software was from scratch. And then I did the same thing at my last role, and then I'm doing it now at Encode.
So how do you enter into a company and then build the value practice? Where do you start?
That's a really great question. I mean, you really start by understanding the product. I think that almost is bare bones. You have to understand what your product's doing and what are people doing with your product. I think that most companies have an idea of the value that their product provides. That's table stakes in a lot of ways. But the big piece when it comes to building a value practice, I found, is understanding what your product does and how you talk about the impact of your product in a way that is segmentable, but also exhaustive. Like really starting to say, okay, our product does all these incredible things. It provides a huge amount of value across all these different areas. How can we streamline and simplify that into a number of buckets that aren't just cut cost and increase revenue? What are some really sticky, tangible ways to start to describe that value. And then we can slowly start to bucket the benefits and the features and functionality that support those benefits. And then, of course, the math that lets us quantify that. And while we're doing that, the other piece I found that's very important is understanding what are the KPIs that are going to matter to the customer. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily matter what Forrester says or what I say or what anyone at any company says. All that matters is at the end of the day, are we tracking and quantifying KPIs that support the end users and their bosses and their bosses' bosses in achieving their goals, really?
It's interesting you say that because it's actually quite topical. I was giving a webinar earlier today to Pavilion all around when is the right time to bring in a value motion? How do you establish a value motion? I think they're two different things, right? Of course, a value practice is one, and that's for organizations I think that are already pretty established. But equally, what I find is, and we work with a lot of companies in varying degrees of maturity in building the kind of their value management solution, right? And what's interesting, value is remove value selling. Value is foundational to any company. And actually, from our experience, the best way to establish your value drivers is to go to existing customers of yours and literally ask them, what is the value that we're delivering? And keep asking that question, right? But almost like keep asking why. Imagine they say, you help us save time in drafting documents, right? Imagine it's an AI legal software tool, right? But what is the value that's bringing to you? And then, they can say, well, maybe that's helping us to work faster. But why is that valuable to you? Because that means our sales reps can sign deals faster, right? So it's a really interesting way for companies, even that are more or less established, smaller, younger, to still, because a value motion, it's innately built into any organization that's selling a product, right?
I completely agree. I'd even take it a step further and think about it also from the internal side. For me, when I'm building a value practice, the most important thing I'm trying to do is establish a full cycle value motion that is interoperable and self-feeding. So the idea here is if we think about a flywheel. We have marketing, top of funnel activities. We have pre-sales activities. We have the actual sales cycle. We have how we're interacting with customers, and we have product development, and then we have the top of marketing. The most core thing that I've found to be really impactful is to think about how we're communicating value, not just externally, but also internally, and having it start at that piece, right? If we can sit down and say, look, this is the value of our product at the marketing level, here's some customer stories, here's some KPIs, move into the pre-sales level where we're starting to do product demonstrations in a way that highlights the how of those broader, less specific value pieces at marketing, turn that into the sales cycle where we turn the lens onto the customer and say, let's focus on you. Let's focus on your ecosystem, on your process. What would that specific value be for you? And then in the customer phase where it says, well, we have this business case. Let's, instead of treating it like a tool that we've used to sell you something, let's actually treat this like a roadmap and a project plan that can be effectively used to not just help us do the work, but measure our success, and then go to product and say, hey, listen, you're continuously building out the solution. We're having new features. We're building out new products. What is the impact of this going to be? Can we test the impact as we do beta and roll it out to some of our early adoption customers? And then let's take that and then put that at the top of the sales funnel. And what I really like about this approach is it lets us be very partnership focused, right? Yeah. It creates all these win-win situations where, sometimes sales can be complicated. Sometimes it can feel like there's competing goals. But when we're operating it from a value perspective, it really does create this lovely situation where the business case becomes the blueprint, and it puts every single person involved in this relationship into this really lovely position where we can all know if we're doing what we're supposed to do. And if something isn't measuring up to the business case, hopefully you've built your value framework in such a way that you can start to identify, well, we're not getting as much value as we anticipated in bucket B, but that's okay because we actually have this blueprint we built down here that says, okay, here's how we can increase the value with the solution.
like I couldn't have said it better, and you're selling our product philosophy better than we can. No, because it's true. I think a lot of the time people
Yeah.
see a business case as a closing tool, that thing that you need to do at the end of a cycle when your prospect or your champion asks for it. And let's face it, business cases are like taxes. Nobody wants to do them, right? But they are a crucial part of the sale.
Yeah.
And if you use them as a value hypothesis early on, and you actually build them in collaboration with your prospect, almost to say, right, all of this is hypothetical until the rubber meets the road anyway. So let's
Correct.
build something that we can both align on based on your pain points and based on our value drivers as a business, using that business case as a tool to do that. And then once you roll out, that morphs into the value realization piece.
I think that's lovely. Honestly, that's really the right approach. I think there's also a couple other steps that you can do. I found that depending on the product that you're working with, you can really, I mean, you should always have value start off in discovery, understanding what the customer is thinking about when they're looking at a solution. And you don't need to build a business case from the first call, but broadly speaking, you should understand what the core objectives of the customer are. And once you don't even need a full value practice, but if you have a good value framework, you can start to understand, okay, well, this customer wants this benefit, this benefit, this benefit. This means that this feature will be important. And it probably means they're also thinking about these other things. It gives you a nice blueprint. But the other thing that I really love about business value is that when you have a product that naturally lends itself to things like trials or proof of concepts or sandboxes, you can use that exercise as a way to, as you said, the rubber meets the road, almost field test components of the business case. So what I really love is that if you go in and you start with, well, infuse the beginning part of a sales process with value to make sure you're all on the same page, then what you can do is also, you can then come back in and say, okay, well, we can test out A, B, and C from the business case during this POC and effectively use this POC as a way to field test a lot of our assumptions. So the business case then doesn't become this hypothetical. It becomes this thing that is inbuilt in the success criteria of a POC or a pilot.
It's a great way also to earn the trust of a prospect, of a champion. It's like, look,
Yes.
Yeah, we'll do a sandbox. We'll start getting at least some baseline metrics that we can hang our hat on for the business case. But equally, once you start rolling out, then the value realization you can start measuring the realized value, and then you can use that as a way to course correct should you need to.
That's exactly correct. And I think the other nice piece about having this be part of a POC is it gets a lot of the measurement pieces done. I found that, depending on the solution, measuring value post-implementation can often be a challenge. There are a lot of tools that have some of this stuff built in, but inevitably at every company I've worked at, there are components of the business case that you're building that rely on a degree of self-report. Like if you're talking about efficiency gains, oftentimes you're going to have to at least do some kind of an audit between a pre-product process and a post-product process. And if you do that during the POC, you almost get that baseline built out of the way. So when you start to go in and do that first QBR or have that first check-in, that can almost be used as the example of the pre-product state.
And so when you do go in and set a value practice, do you also, how big a team do you normally invest in? And what kind of deals, what is a threshold of deal size that those individuals can be attached to?
That really depends. It depends on, I'll just tell you what it depends on, then I'll give you my philosophy. Number one, it depends on the nature of the product. Some products lend themselves to a very simple sales cycle. And some products are really complex and have like a 15-month sales cycle and have a lot of pieces to it. I would say, generally speaking, is in 2 years ago, you'd want to have like a ratio of value people that corresponds to sales team members, similar to how you do with SEs. I think now the world's very different. There's lots of AI tools. We have just pure LLMs. We have product tools. And I think the role of a business value team is changing fairly dramatically, right? Like, as an example, in my last role, one of the things we built was a custom GPT that automated account research, and another one that would do things like put together a value hypothesis based on publicly available data. So I think that today there are a lot of different ways that elements of value work can be automated in a way that increases the overall level of competency when it comes to value of the organization. I think that means that a lot of the deals that are smaller and more basic are generally going to be able to be self-serviced for most companies. But at the same time, you have these, marquee complex deals that are going to require
Always.
elements of bespokeness. Yeah, exactly. Like
You can't self-service those.
you can't self-service those. And again, you can also think about the role of a value team now as not just individual contributors or leaders managing those teams, but also people who are doing a lot of the almost philosophical work of saying, okay, what is value for us? How do we start to incorporate? Because I've found also for a lot of companies that the pace of change is increasing, and
Yeah.
what companies are providing for their customers is accelerating. Development cycles have gotten faster. So
And yeah. I was going to say
yeah,
that's a challenge. So I was also on a panel last week at another event where one of the heads of value at Wiz, the big
yeah.
cybersecurity company, now or on the way to be part of Google. And one of the things that we were talking about was the pace of innovation at that company is astronomical. And so how does value keep up with a pace of product innovation that from one day to another, or one week to another, just shipping new product?
I mean, that's a great question. So I think part of this goes into how you've done your initial value framework. If you've done a really good job with your value framework, you've created something that has those buckets of benefits. And unless you go through a crazy acquisition where you get into a whole new line of business, or unless you do some kind of massive strategic pivot, the core benefits you're providing will remain consistent,
Yeah.
right? Like if we look at the CLM space, you could pretty much keep the same value buckets there, even if you have a whole new AI ultra solution you've added. You're doing similar things, you're providing similar benefits, just more. So if you have a company that is just innovating incredibly, but you have a value framework that is still going to be exhaustive of the impacts that the solution provides, what I'm a big believer in is embedding some of these value methodologies into the product development lifecycle, like
Hmm.
at product inception, at initial testing, and at like alpha and beta.
How do you do that? Do you, yeah.
It's a great
uh,
question. So, like, this is very hard without talking about anything specifics, but let's say that one of the benefits you have is increasing efficiency. Look, that's a nebulous one. Most products do that, right? Okay, so we're at the drawing board. We're thinking about new products. We have a bunch of benefits, and we know that for whatever reason, increasing efficiency is the thing our customers want the most. So we're gonna build some new features that are gonna be about increasing efficiency. Okay, so as we're building out these features, we are articulating how this product is increasing efficiency. Maybe it's reducing the number of steps in a particular workflow. Maybe it's, cutting processing time. Maybe it's reducing manual data entry because of how we're changing a UI, whatever it is. We know that this is the how of increasing efficiency. And then anytime we have a new feature or product, there's a testing period. So if we think this is going to increase efficiency, how much is it going to increase efficiency? What's the specific impact of this specific new feature? And you can come up with a hypothesis. I mean, oftentimes the product teams can do this themselves. You can have a value
Sure.
person help. But then when you roll it out to those early testers, you don't say, "Hey gang, here is this new feature we'd love for you to test." I mean, you do that, but you also say, "Hey, we think or we suspect this will generate X efficiency because of Y does it." And as part of that beta feedback that you're getting from customers, you've tacked on this teeny tiny, maybe it's one or two questions in a normal process, but all of a sudden now you can then go to the sales team, the marketing team, and everyone else and say, "Hey, we have this new UI." And everyone says, "Why do we care about a new UI?" Well, this new UI increases efficiency by an additional 3% because it reduces the total number of clicks by 7. And people
It's
say, "Oh,
awesome.
that's nice." Right? So again, that's the goal. That's why if we think about having a full cycle value, as long as everyone's thinking at the company, as long as you basically want every function to be thinking about value with
Yeah.
the same language, with the same verbiage, in the same way, so that product can be doing their thing and marketing can be doing their thing, or the SEs can be doing their thing. But anytime it comes time to talk about what the product's doing, what it's providing for customers, it's effortless for everyone to be speaking the same language, which is
Everybody
something that
understands each other. Yeah,
yeah, and I've honestly found that to be one of the biggest challenges with go-to-market
interesting.
motions generally, is that people talk about things in different ways and stuff gets lost in translation.
No, I think that's bang on. How do you recruit product to work with you on that? Do you find them genuinely and generally collaborative? Because and also product marketing, because product marketing's role is also to understand and build out the performance of the product.
So, I mean, I think you kind of gave me the answer to that right here. It generally, product marketing is your conduit in a lot of ways. And product can be really interesting. Sometimes at some companies, they're very siloed. They're off in their own little world. I generally think there are some benefits to that, but I think that the more communication there is,
Totally.
generally the better. But at every company, no matter how solid product is, product marketing is the conduit and they're the group that's been specifically empowered and chartered to be the voice of product in many ways. So
And
that's definitely one way to do it.
and I love the fact that you said everybody needs to be speaking the same language, same verbiage, same terminology, because that then means that everybody is oriented around the same focus of value, the same drivers, and everybody understands exactly where you're driving. That
Yeah.
it's easier said than done, but equally it's a lot. It's very the value tends to be understated. I mean, it's really really key.
I mean, it makes everything easier and it solves a lot of problems, right? Inevitably, like everyone understands, every group at a company understands that value is really important. And what I've found is that oftentimes people can understand that value is really important. And then every function within the business will often start to approach this in their own way. Like the customer organization will say, here's how we think about value with our customers. And you'll have sales saying one thing and product will be saying something else. And marketing will say, well, here's really the value of our product. And I found that this is something that inherently happens over time as companies grow, unless there's a lot of intention placed on coherency and consistency when it comes to value, which is where, generally speaking, a value group comes in. I maintain that one of the core functions of any value group is to be that sort of owner of what is the value in collaboration with all the other stakeholders, of course. But the idea is that you can't have every group going out and doing their own thing because then it becomes impossible to translate. And if you get, you're at $1 billion ARR and you have 16 different ways of talking about value, you lose out on the benefit of, or some of the larger benefits of value. And it's a balancing act.
And where within the organization does your role usually sit? Is your reporting line into is it pre-sales? Is it CRO? Is it
It's always a little bit different. And I think the challenge is that I could make a case for value to sit anywhere in an organization.
yeah?
Right? If we
Exactly.
think about that flywheel, you could have it in product. Why not? You could have it
Exactly.
in marketing. You could have it in sales.
It says a
Broadly
lot, right?
speaking, well, it says a lot. But the challenge is of course, is no matter where you seat your value group will dictate a large chunk of their focus and will naturally cause problems. Now, one of the things I've seen that's a bit more recent, which I like, is a lot of teams have a dedicated strategy function, which similar as like those old school go-to-market functions operate as sort of an umbrella that has a very large charter and a very broad charter. I've seen value live under strategy, which I think as we go forward, when you start thinking about business value teams owning AI tools that are doing a lot of scale work, when you start thinking about business value being especially like the product conduit, I think about business value then also still having to go out, or getting to, I should say, go out and talk to customers and prospects and be that bridge. I think in some sort of a role like that makes a lot of sense. But if there isn't a strategy team, put it in pre-sales or sales. I've personally found that value teams tend to do best when they get to move fairly quickly and innovate quickly. It's a team that does very well in that type of a setting. And what I've always liked about being placed in the sales organization is that sales organizations have a laser focus on results.
Yeah.
And there's a lot less time spent on planning. There's a lot less time spent on thinking and pontificating. It's really all about, we have the strategic goal. How do we execute on it? And then really focusing on that execution.
Yeah, absolutely. And have you ever been in a role where you felt that the company didn't have full buy-in for value motion from the very top?
From the very top, no, I don't think I've never seen that. I think generally speaking, it's a well documented fact that value moves the needle for businesses. I have been in situations where there's been skeptics in certain groups, but I've never been in a position where we've had leadership saying that value doesn't move the needle.
No, it makes perfect sense. And then with regard to how you collaborate with sales, is there a dedicated kind of tag team model on deals where there's the rep and the BVC together? And how does that dynamic usually play out?
Again, I think it depends on the product in a lot of ways. I mean, some products you have a whole village selling it. You have like an SC, you have a product
Yeah,
expert, you have the sales rep. It depends. Now, and then in others, of course, you just have a sales rep, sometimes not even an SE. So what I've found is that broadly speaking, it will make sense to view the sales person as like the quarterback or the
yeah,
general. They're sort of organizing resources. And I think if you've done a really good job building out the practice and setting up the value framework and setting up the specific hooks during a process where value comes in, even without the business value team being involved, you kind of naturally get into these nice places where, and again, this is just in a perfect situation, where you come in at very specific times to do very specific functions and support certain types of motions, like value discovery, going deeper, right? I think that broadly speaking, if it's just a basic, we need to quantify some light value, here's a calculator, that can all be self-serviced. Where we need to go deeper or more or further articulate something or do some kind of a support around a POC or a pilot or something along those lines, then you go a bit deeper. And it's the same thing on the customer side of the house. I'm a big believer in value realization as being one of the most important
oh,
functions of a value group.
even more so today where churn is always at
Well,
risk.
yeah, it's true, but it's also I think that it's as I think it's almost a function of technology. Technology's gotten so much better at measuring itself.
Mm.
And with all of this data, it becomes much easier for me. I mean, I remember like 6 years ago, getting data on a tool's performance was an arduous task where you have to work with admins at the company and spend several weeks pulling the data. And maybe the data is in a really ugly CSV. And now you're going to have to make some pivot tables. That's all. Most products have some forms of data that you can use now that's either built right into the tool or you can get on the back end. That's like telemetry level data. So now the idea here is that it becomes very easy to go to a customer and say, here is how you're doing. Here is how you can improve. And we talked a lot about partnership before. It's just such an effortless and fun motion, right? Where you get to go to the customer and work with the customer and really start to say, hey, here's what you've delivered so far. Here's what you can basically credibly take to your leadership and say, this is the results of our project. And then here's what we can do in the short term to make that number go higher. And here are some options for long-term things. And then you have customer success teams or customer account management teams really focusing the lion's share of their work on value delivery, where
That's
they're
great.
working with the customers to hit those out of the park.
It's a true partnership, right? And it keeps the customer also accountable for value as well. It's a team sport, so to speak. One last question on this general topic.
Yeah.
Have you ever come across a scenario where you're partnering with a sales rep and you are sensing that this deal should be qualified out because you're not feeling the value? Like, how often do you actually take the role of helping to qualify a deal as part of the value motion?
Oh, it's tricky, right? I mean, look, sometimes you get brought in really early and you do it.
You probably smell it very quickly.
I mean, if you get brought in really early to a deal and it's one of those situations, you can kind of say it. But at the same point, it's very there's almost a unwillingness to say that to a sales rep. Like, sales reps have the hardest jobs in any company,
Totally.
right? Like they're living and dying by quota. They have a hard job, and they work
They're
very
busy.
hard, and so,
Yeah.
and sometimes they have to chase things that don't make sense. I mean, I think that anyone who's ever worked in value has a litany of experiences where they've been brought into a deal. They take one look at it and they say, "This is dead." But at the same time, you still have to give it a shot. Like, nothing's ever 100% dead. You look at some and you're like, there's a sliver of a chance this thing comes through, and I'm not liking the odds. And generally speaking, like those can occur as a huge waste of time, but you still got to do them. It's part of the deal, right? Like what you can then do is talk with sales leadership and say, look, like we'll take some Hail Marys. Because there are some deals that then come down to, it's like, it's not only the rep who's like, I need this deal. It's their leader who says, I need this deal. Then it's their boss who says that our whole region needs this deal. And then it's the SVP of sales who said, we need this to hit our company number for the quarter. So you gotta go in and do the best. You can.
It reminds me of, have you seen A Princess Bride? Classic
Yes, it's
80s.
classic.
He's only mostly dead.
He's only mostly dead. There you go. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I find that most of those deals obviously don't close, but every now and then one of them does. So it becomes one of those situations where you're honor bound to give it your best shot. And you could say now I think that like on the flip side of that, for churn reduction, that's one where I'm always willing to say absolutely not, because sometimes you'll get into a situation where a customer's like, look, we ran into this a lot like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, where we had all the tech layoffs. Someone could say, listen, I need your help. We got to quantify the value for this customer. And you look and you say, well, the entire department's been laid off. I don't know if this even makes sense for them to do. There's no one to operate the tool.
And the value's got to be mutual, right? You can't. You got to be genuine with the
yeah.
value.
Yeah, and I think I'm always much more comfortable saying no on that side of the house, because you can look at it and say, like, is this customer getting value? And if they're not, that means something's gone wrong. You got to fix it.
Excellent. Jonathan, I've just got 2 more questions for you.
Please.
2 slightly uncomfortable questions. The first one is, who is the best value engineer you've ever worked with?
Best value engineer I've ever worked with. Ron Hymoff. He was in charge of value engineering at DocuSign. He was really good. He's I don't know. I say was. He's very much still alive, but he is Israeli, and when he was doing his service, he did bomb disposals. So one of the things he'd always say is like, at the end of the day, you got to remember, slightly tense, is he said, you got to think about at the end of the day, like you're not disposing a bomb. The consequences of things going terribly wrong are not so bad, all things considered. And I thought that was a very nice approach to bring to value. And the other thing that he did really, really well was he was very, very, very to the point and very, very candid. And this is something that customers tended to love, and I think really showed up in his work, where it was very much, here is plainly what's so. And I learned a lot from him.
People like candor, because it means that they feel like they can trust you because you're honest.
Absolutely. Any boss who says that something I've done isn't great, I love it, because that means when they say something nice, I can trust it and don't have to think about it. It makes life a lot easier.
The other question, who's the best sales rep you've ever worked with?
There's so many. I think that's even a harder question. I mean, there's so many different types of sales reps, which makes it really hard. And the best sales reps are all a little bit unique in what they do. And that uniqueness leads to some great stuff. I mean, I would say if I had to pick one, I'd pick 2. I would say there was one fellow named Shane Logan, who's amazing. And what he did is he does a really excellent job of understanding the customer and following up. He's one of those sales reps where he's able to work with customers and do that partnership thing for like a long-term account success. Christian's another sales rep I worked with who was amazing. And in a similar vein, what he did, which I love, was he really focused on the relationship side of the house. Like, what does this person need? And he would also
undervalued.
Yeah. And he'd also really start thinking, he would always think about, what are all the little things that need to happen for this deal to progress? So outside of the traditional blocking and tackling, have we built a business case? Have we done a trial? Like, what is every single thing that we could possibly do to make this a happier customer, a more successful partnership? And fantastic seller.
Excellent. Jonathan, thank you so much. It's been a real treat to speak with you.
My pleasure, Martin.
Have a good one. Thank you.
You too. Take care.